All right, as a continuation of our radiator replacement, we are going to go ahead and replace the thermostat and gasket in the thermostat housing. Two parts that are necessary in this one, and I'm sticking with OEM Mazda components, is a thermostat for the NA Miata, which is a two-part thermostat unit. So it's got one small thermostatic component here that actually I think goes down at a lower temperature than the main unit does. And even though this came with a gasket, I guess inadvertently ended up buying a second gasket. So I will include these part numbers at the bottom of the video if anybody else is interested in doing this. Once we get this piece off, we're going to go ahead and clean it up a little bit. It's a little messy here on the top. And once we've pulled that off, then we'll go ahead and put everything back together again. The thermostat housing itself is equipped with two 12mm bolts, one here on top, another one down here on the bottom. I'm going to keep a close eye on the orientation of the gasket as well. There's a little piece of it sticking up here, but just want to make sure that we end up getting it back on pretty much the same way that it was originally. And so let's go ahead and loosen her up. Should not be on that hard. If they are, then I've got a little bit of a problem. You're dealing with a steel bolt and an aluminum housing, and I don't want to shear the heads off. But once we get this off, we're going to torque these back down to their original specifications, which is between 14 and 19 foot-pounds. If you are not the owner of a torque wrench, I would highly suggest you get one because they are infinitely useful to make sure you don't over tighten, under tighten things, especially when you're dealing with cooling components. Under tightening usually means a leak. And in the case of, oops, got a little bit of drip. And in the case of cooling components like this, over tightening means you're likely cracking something. So. Doesn't look great, but will be serviceable. Okay, the inside looks pretty good. Not a whole lot of crud or buildup inside, which is nice to see. And the thermostat actually looks remarkably in good shape. Now, take careful note of actually the orientation of the thermostat where the little small unit is. Also, you noticed, if you remember looking at the unit I had a little while ago, the spring side is on the back. And let's see if I can get this thing free. He's on there pretty good. Oh, gasket's so old, it's crispy. Very crispy. I should have put gloves on for this. We need to make sure that as part of this process that we end up getting these surfaces really clean, because if we don't, we run the risk of having a leak. Get this little bit off. There you go. There. It looks pretty clean up inside there. It's good. Slightly different design than the one I've got, but close enough. But anyway, that looks like it might be salvageable, just in case I ever need a replacement. All right, that's it. All right, we're going to use this opportunity now to go ahead and clean up this mating surface a little bit. It's a little bit on the dirty side. All right, after a concerted amount of elbow grease, managed to get this down to at least I think a more usable state. There's still a lot of heavy pitting in the aluminum at this end, but I don't think it will really affect the operation. So at this point, I think I can call this part done and ready to use, and then we'll end up moving over to the engine next.
All right, at this point, I've gone and I put a paper towel inside here. I don't want any of the cleaning process to get debris down inside these cooling lines. So what I've got is I've got a Dremel, or I guess a hand tool, equipped with a brass brush, and I'm going to try to brush away a lot of this debris here. I've tried scraping away as much as I can with a soft scrubber type pad, but it got a little bit off, so let's keep on going.
Okay, so add a little bit of lighting so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. But one of the challenges with trying to get this new thermostat in is that gravity is working a little bit against you. At the top of the thermostat, there is a small arrow, which you might be able to see on camera, which needs to point up. So that gives you kind of an idea, and that's the same orientation that you saw when I first removed it. The trick here is that if you don't have this seated in there just right, when it comes time to put the cover on, what can happen is that this piece will slide down a little bit, and you'll have it down in this position, and then when you start tightening down your bolts, what will happen is you'll pinch the bottom part of the gasket, you won't have a good seal, and very likely you will end up cracking the thermostat housing cover. So what we're going to do with our gasket is we're going to use a little bit of upholstery adhesive on the side that's going to be facing towards the engine, and what we're going to do is spray that on. I'm going to protect a little bit of the gasket seal in here, which goes up against the thermostat itself. And what we'll do is we'll use that, wait till it gets a little bit tacky, and then attach it here. And then what that'll do is that'll hold this in place while we tighten our screws down for the cover. So that's going to be our next thing. So now that we've got our gasket with a little bit of upholstery adhesive on it, or essentially it's trim adhesive for automotive use, what we're going to do is we're going to use that to kind of hold things in place while we put our cover on. So what we'll do first, very gently put our thermostat into place, put the arrow lined up with the little mark at the top, try to hold it steady. Drop it. Let me set this here and stick it up there. Fortunately, my fingers are sticky too, so it's not helping. And since we cleaned the aluminum really well, that should keep that in place. And so there you go. So now with that, you're not having to fight gravity to try to get this gasket into place. And the adhesive is thin enough where it shouldn't impede or otherwise impact our ability to get a good seal. Now, the one thing you do want to make sure is that your screws are in the right screw openings are not being blocked by the gasket. So what I'm going to do real quick, thread those in. Now I'm going to get new bolts. That's the one that some service appointment messed up a long time ago. Make sure that everything's lined up. That all looks good. Now, one of the other things that is useful for this type of application is making sure that you put some anti-seize on your threads, because one of the big problems, and you see a lot of stuff on the forums about it, is issues where these bolts seize up. Now, like I said, I'm going to get replacement bolts, but what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is I'm going to demonstrate real quick, just putting the cover on with a little bit of the anti-seize, trying not to contaminate
my mounting surface here. So I'll put a little bit. Don't get too crazy with it, you don't need a whole lot. Just enough to coat the threads. Oops, I need to get that other bolt out. That's good enough to hold that in place. Again, with the adhesive that's on the back of the gasket, we don't have to worry about the gasket or the thermostat falling loose. And just put on just a little bit, not much. It goes a long way. Good to go. Stabs in there, finger tight. And that, my friends, is basically that. So we've got a good gasket in place now. The next stage in this process is to go through and tighten these bolts down to 14 to 19 foot-pounds, and that will finish up this particular task.